On today's episode of The Golden Bolt, we're continuing right along with the Sly Cooper Marathon as I review Sly 2, Band of Thieves. Released in 2004, just 2 years after the first game, Sly 2 promised to be bigger, bolder, and better than its predecessor. But does it live up to such a lofty goal, or does it fall into the sequel trap? Let's find out. 2 years after the events of Sly 1, the gang's adventure this time begins at the Cairo Museum of Natural History, where the newest exhibit is a fully reconstructed clockwork. Knowing firsthand the danger that Clockwork's metal body could bring, Sly, Bentley, and Murray attempt to steal Clockwork's parts before somebody else can. However, when Sly gets to the exhibition room, he finds out that they're late to the party. The Clockwork parts had already been taken, and Carmelita had set a trap, hoping the thief would return to the scene of the crime. After Carmelita accuses Sly of the Clockwork heist, her new understudy Neela lets slip that the Claw Gang could be the ones that made off with the parts. Naturally, the Cooper Gang escapes the ensuing chase and starts studying up on the Claw Gang. If they've got the parts, they're definitely not using them for good. Sadly, it turns out that assumption's correct. The Claw Gang ain't no fiendish five. They don't just sit idly by on their victory after their heist is complete. Instead, each member pushes forward in several highly illegal endeavors, using the Clockwork parts to expedite the process. For example, Dimitri uses the Clockwork tail feathers to print counterfeit money at a breakneck pace, driving himself to fortune. Jean Bisson uses the Clockwork talons to deforest thousands of trees for his logging venture. And Rajan uses the Clockwork heart to make illegal psychedelic drugs. I'm not even exaggerating, his spice ring is quite literally just a drug ring with a slightly more PG name. Sly 2 isn't messing around. Don't forget, this game was rated E. The Cooper Gang isn't messing around either, and with the occasional help and tips provided by Constable Neela, piece by piece they take back the Clockwork parts. Step by step they take down each member of the Claw Gang, and bit by bit they uncover the secret behind the entire Claw Gang operation. One thing I love about Sly 2 is that these heists aren't always successful for Sly and the crew. More often than not, the game's episodes end without a decisive boss fight, and that member of the Claw Gang escapes to fight another day. This makes them feel so much more formidable than the one-and-done Fiendish Five of the original game. By the time you get to that boss fight, you've been dealing with a single villain for 2 or more hours. You've seen them develop, you've heard their strategies change. They become full-fledged characters rather than just obstacles. When it's not guaranteed that the Cooper Gang wins, and you actually see them lose a couple times, it makes those victories feel that much more satisfying. On the subject of satisfying, it's time for a quick spoiler warning. Click ahead to this point in the video if you wish to avoid spoilers for Sly 2, but again, do keep in mind that Sly 3 is going to deal directly with the spoilers from this game. After the gang takes down Dimitri, and right near the end of their second attempt to take down Rajan, Neela betrays Sly, leading to him and Murray being captured by Interpol. She also frames Carmelita of helping the Cooper Gang and gets her arrested. Despite having to fight off his fears and go solo in order to save his friends, Bentley learns that the Contessa, Carmelita's boss, is actually a member of the Claw Gang and is working to brainwash Carmelita so that she takes the fall for the entire operation. Eventually, after saving Carmelita and putting the Contessa behind bars, the gang sneaks their way onto the airship of the Claw Gang's leader, Arpeggio. Here they find that Clockwork has been fully reassembled. This is where it all comes together masterfully. We find out that this small bird has planned to place himself into Clockwork's body to become immortal, but he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle: hate. So Arpeggio and his protege Neela created the Claw Gang to generate that very hate. Rajan's spice opened up the minds of its users to hypnotism at the hands of the Contessa. All the Contessa needed for mass hypnotism was a huge amount of flashing light to aid in the process. So Jean Bisson had been chosen to siphon the light out of the Northern Lights. With all of the pieces in place, Arpeggio planned to fly his airship to Paris, where thousands had consumed massive quantities of Rajan's spice at Dimitri's club. Upon being hypnotized, the entire city would then go insane with enough hatred to fuel Clockwork's frame. And if you thought it ended there, you'd be wrong. At the very start of the game, Neela specifically tipped Sly off to the Claw Gang's existence to get the ball rolling. Sly, Bentley, and Murray stole back every single Clockwork part one by one, leaving them all a sitting duck, or owl, for Neela and Arpeggio to steal all at once. The entirety of the game up until this point builds to this moment, this reveal that everything the Cooper Gang had done was itself a setup. God, this is just perfect. Or it would be until what comes next. Neela double-crosses Arpeggio, gets into Clockwork's body herself, and becomes... Clockla. I kid you not, she calls herself Clockla. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense that after all of this, she would be our final boss, but man, after hearing that Arpeggio had set this entire plan in motion just to live in a stronger body, it feels weak to just write him off in an instant like that. And for what? So Neela can become immortal? We don't get any motivation here for this betrayal, and that lack of motivation is the sole weak point in an otherwise fantastic narrative. Obviously, Sly takes Clockla down, yet again defeating the owl with the help of Carmelita. Upon crash landing in Paris, Murray lifts Clockwork's mouth open so that Bentley can grab and destroy the hate chip once and for all. But Murray's not strong enough, and Bentley's spine is crushed under the weight of Clockwork's beak. No, seriously, he's paralyzed. I told you, this game isn't messing around. Murray's able to pry Clockwork open and grab the now motionless Bentley, and Carmelita destroys the hate chip. With that one motion, all of the Clockwork parts begin to wilt, as if the years had caught up to them all in one instant. But at what cost? Clockwork was right when he said that Sly would never be rid of him, and now every time that he looks at Bentley, he's going to see the pain that Clockwork caused to him and his family. Knowing that Bentley and Murray couldn't handle being arrested by Carmelita, Sly bargains with her and offers himself up for capture. Leaving their gear behind, Murray carries the limp Bentley away, and Sly shortly afterwards escapes the Interpol helicopter. This is where Sly 2 comes to a close. Band of Thieves takes a massive leap after the success of Sly 1, moving to tell a deeper, more detailed, and clearly darker story, as you can tell if you hung around for the spoilers. We see the Cooper gang pushed to its limits several times, we see villains outrun and even outsmart our heroes. There is so much to unpack here, and even if I unpacked it all, I don't know that I would do it justice. The villains are even better than those from the first game, with Dimitri being a standout. His mannerisms, such as his dialogue being almost exclusively misinterpreted catchphrases and slang, led to him becoming a fan favorite that would make an appearance in every subsequent Sly game. The heroes are fleshed out significantly as well, with Bentley at points totally shining, and Murray actually getting a character. Instead of just eating and being dumb, now his strength is played up, and he acts like a superhero named the Murray. It's fantastic. This whole story is fantastic. Yes, it sort of limps a little bit near the end due to that one plot twist, but it's redeemed by the ending. Besides that single tripping point, Sly 2 tells a powerful tale from start to finish. I'm still shocked sometimes that this kind of story is told in a game made at least partly for children. It approaches mature subjects and treats them and the audience with respect, trusting that the kids could handle it. It's designed in such a way that it's perfect for all players no matter their age. I could keep on gushing, but it probably goes without saying we're looking at a golden bolt for Sly 2's story, easily. Get ready for some more gushing, because Sly 2 is about as good a second outing as you can ever have out of a video game. It's far grander in scale, it's far deeper mechanically, you know what, let me start from the beginning. Take everything you knew from the first game and throw it out the window. It's no longer a stealthy, linear Crash Bandicoot style of gameplay we're working with. Instead, we've gone open world, and it's not just Sly in those worlds. For the first time, Bentley and Murray are full-on field agents. The game is called Band of Thieves after all. I'll get into those two in a little bit though. While Sly 1 was a tight platformer with light stealth elements to make the platforming more unique, 2 moves much deeper into that stealth mindset, while keeping the platforming and even adding beat-em-up action gameplay. Instead of being a one-hit KO, Sly and the gang have a health bar to encourage you to fight if you get caught. You can much more easily sneak up behind enemies. Hell, Sly can even pickpocket them with his cane. To encourage a stealthy approach, pickpocketing will always earn you more money than if you had killed the enemies in combat, and some enemies even have loot in their pockets that are worth even more money. On top of this, missions are more likely to require stealth because unlike Sly 1, the missions in Band of Thieves are all interconnected. The 8 overworlds of Sly 2 are each just as much of a character as the Cooper Gang or their Claw Gang targets. Despite being relatively small, they are densely packed with content. Guards are prowling the grounds and the rooftops ready for a chase or a fight. Every locale has one or multiple landmarks that make sure you always have your bearings. Sprinkled throughout the worlds are even expensive treasures that the gang can grab and run back to the safe house. Taking even a single hit will break those treasures though, so you have to be careful. Some of these are booby-trapped too, so you've got to get them back so Bentley can disarm them before you explode. Almost every inch of each overworld is used at some point before you move on to the next area. And then, of course, there's the main goodies that we already know and love, the clue bottles. Rather than having multiple sets of bottles for every mission, the overworlds each have 30 bottles, and they generally provide a much more useful ability when gathered. The first game's power-ups were nice, but often they were tied to specific playstyles. In Band of Thieves, there are still a few situational powers, but you're probably going to find yourself using a bunch of them. Namely because Sly 2 allows you to hotkey up to 3 gadgets on the L1, L2, and R2 buttons per character. Having a combat dodge to easily slide by attacks when you're swarmed by enemies is insanely useful, or dropping a smoke bomb to make a hasty escape, or throwing an alarm clock to distract enemies so that you can sneak right by without getting into an altercation entirely. It's all wonderful. There are also a couple secret gadgets only unlocked via cheat code, like this one that lets you throw a miniature Tom from Toonami to draw the attention of enemies. Come on, that's just cool. My favorite though is the stealth slide. I don't know why, I just love sliding through the levels without making a peep. It's so much more satisfying than sprinting by pressing R1 and drawing the enemy's attention. Bentley and Murray each have their own sets of gadgets as well, which I'll get into a little bit later. Now you might be asking where all these powers are going to come from if there are only 8 sets of clue bottles compared to the dozens of the first game. That brings me back to that loot, those treasures, and those coins. Sly 2 introduces ThiefNet, an online black market where the gang can sell their stolen goods and buy new gadgets. Yet again, many of these are optional, but you'll still find yourself hooked regardless, pickpocketing whenever you can, smashing everything around you for extra coins, and scouring the overworlds for treasure. All the while, you're learning the world more, you're attaching yourself to the locales, and you're creating moments that'll come back to you whenever you replay the game. So many games have a lifeless open world, and it's one of the biggest sins in gaming when it happens. Sly 2 absolutely never has that problem for me. Part of that is because many of the game's missions take place right in the overworld, rather than being in their own levels. You'll follow the Claw Gang members around their respective hub worlds for varying reasons. You'll track guard patterns. You'll plant a bug in their base to hear their communications. Sometimes it's even an actual bug. That's not to say that every mission takes place outside though, there are several interior missions too, and each of them have their own layouts. For example, you'll ransack the inside of Rajan's guest house, putting together a suit for Sly to wear. With a few exceptions, all of the game's missions are incredibly fun. The exterior ones do a great job of further helping these worlds stick out in your minds, while the interiors are wonderful for changing up the pace. No matter what, they often show that Sucker Punch was really ahead of their time on this one. Many people have said it before, but Sly 2 can be seen as a predecessor to the Assassin's Creed games, except designed for kids. There are a series of high-octane missions on a moving train that predated Uncharted 2's big train set piece by half a decade. I'm not saying Sly directly inspired either of those two things, of course, it's just interesting to note. Although, Sly and Nathan Drake are rivals in PlayStation All-Stars. Maybe they're arguing about who can destroy more trains. The missions play another key part in this whole equation too, and that's where I get to bring in Bentley and Murray. Each member of the Cooper Gang will have his own task during each heist, and each of these missions plays into the character's strengths mechanically. Sly, obviously, is going to be sneaking around, stealing things, and climbing things. Bentley and Murray are too weak and too clumsy, respectively, to be doing any sort of stuff like that. Instead, Bentley acts as the demolitions expert and field hacker, taking down the enemy infrastructure, be it physically or digitally. Clearly, he's too weak for hand-to-hand combat to be super effective, so instead he'll fire darts with his crossbow that can put enemies to sleep. He can drop or throw bombs at will too, and in some missions he'll even take control of his trusty RC chopper to do the bombing for him. Later he'll unlock an array of crossbow shots and bombs that can shrink enemies or turn them into health, among other things. Murray, meanwhile, does the heavy lifting of the group, literally. When he's not fighting off waves of enemies, he's carrying stuff that his buddies can't, like a giant priceless gem or an actual bear. Murray's a total tank in combat, punching, throwing, and thunderflopping onto his foes. By buying stuff on ThiefNet, Murray can unlock abilities to scare everybody away just by screaming, or he can just light his fists on fire and instantly disintegrate anything he punches. Although players control Sly for about 60% of the game, these two play a vital role in each episode. See, while Sly 1 focused on individual missions that would lead to the eventual showdown, 2 really drives home the idea that these missions are the setup for a greater job. We're not just earning keys that we need in order to progress, essentially every mission in 2 is one piece of the puzzle, no matter how crazy it may sound. If Bentley says this water tower is a giant robot, you better believe him. And each of these episodes culminates in a big attempted heist, with the entire gang coming together and executing their own tasks. Swapping between Sly, Bentley, and Murray and seeing the synergy feels so satisfying in these levels. The payoff for the past hour or 2 of work is more than worth it when you know that every single bit that you did had an impact. It was a risk for Sucker Punch to expand the scale by this much this quickly, but it was absolutely worth it. Naturally, this episode structure does come with some repetition. You're going to do reconnaissance in every chapter, you're likely going to follow and or bug your target, and you're going to follow Neela around a handful of times too, usually for her to show you an important secret that'll help you in the heist.
Don't fall behind while I lead you to the entrance.
Yeah, I get it. Don't fall behind, keep up, the usual. Neela, you gotta move out of the way. Neela, you gotta, come on, get out of the way. Neela, get it, scooch. Neela, there are guards coming. Come on, just scooch a little bit. Just get out of the way. Neela, just move out of the... You know what? I'm just gonna start the mission over. Probably be a lot better that way. Oh, come on! What? I didn't even hit her! However, despite having some greatest hits mission tropes that pop back up both here and in the sequels, Sly 2's mission design never starts to slack. If it's an old concept, you'll be doing it in a novel way, and often these missions are practically brand new even if they do fall into the categories of steal stuff or break stuff. The only missions I don't really care for tend to be the turret missions, because they're on the easy side but the controls are still kind of stiff. Like my other gripes with the gameplay, this is a very minor nitpick. While we're talking about gripes, let's just get them all out of the way because they tend to go hand in hand. When you select the Abandon Job option during a mission, it boots you right back to the safe house. The main reason I want to abandon a job is that I just started that mission and found a treasure sitting around that I want to return, so booting me back to the safe house is just tedious. This sucks because you can't actually return treasure to the safe house during a mission at all, as in order to deliver treasure you have to enter the safe house, which also abandons the job by default. And when you're in the safe house, there's no indicator of which member of the gang has an active mission, so sometimes you have to exit with a character just to find out, only to re-enter the safe house and change characters again. And lastly, Bentley and Murray very infrequently feel like the overworlds just aren't designed well enough for them. It's very rare, maybe only once or twice each, but sometimes you need to go out of your way with these characters in order to reach an elevated area, since they can't climb like Sly can. This issue is mitigated later on by Murray's turnbuckle jump and Bentley's hover pack, but Bentley's in particular comes pretty late in the game, so it's a bit moot by then. The same goes for their inability to pickpocket. That sort of leaves Sly as the only one who can get loot and reliably farm for coins. Do all of these things kind of suck? Yeah, in my opinion they do. Do they take away from the game's magic? Absolutely not. I don't hesitate one bit to call Band of Thieves a masterclass in design. The mission progression is spot on. The gadget and power-up progression is paced nearly perfectly, with only a little bit of loot grinding at the very end if you decide you want every power. Each character feels unique while also feeling like a member of a team. Hell, not just a team, a family. All three of them have at least one boss fight and several moments to shine. This is what I really wanted out of this series. Yet again, one or two small stumbles don't detract from one of the best PlayStation 2 games of all time. Band of Thieves earns another Golden Bolt. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The Sly franchise does a fantastic job of feeling like a playable cartoon. Everything from the episodic nature of the story, to the short missions that keep your attention without dragging on for too long, matches this goal, and makes sure that kids remember the Cooper Gang long after they're done with the game. Sly 2 takes this a step further, turning the pause screen into a "we'll be right back" screen, allowing the player to decide when the commercials are in this adventure. The comic-style intros and outros are back and better than ever too, this time complemented by more in-game cutscenes as well as Bentley's slideshow scenes. Both of these set different tones and allow the game to convey a far wider range of emotions than the first game. Sly chatting with Carmelita before a ballroom dance brings back that will they won't they romance while also keeping the player a bit on edge. What happens if Sly blows his cover, or if Murray drops the clockwork wings during the dance? It's great stuff.
Cooper!
Oh. Yeah, okay, it's not all great. Carmelita has a new voice actress, and she is, not good. She just sounds so forced. I would argue it's somehow a step down from Sly 1. What's even worse is the same voice actress performs as Neela in this very game, and it's miles ahead of her Carmelita. Thankfully, the rest of the voice cast returns for the main characters, and the new villains fit right in with them. Actually, each of the Cooper Gang improves immensely from the first outing as well. Sly comes off as more experienced. Bentley starts off super jumpy as it's his first time in the field, but over time really comes out of his shell. And Murray's new persona as the Murray is exactly what he needed. Another wonderful touch is that in these short 2 years since Sly 1, we see the gang age thanks to some improved character models. In the first game, Sly in particular had these more pronounced, thinner, and childish features and these massive eyes. That fit his character, of course, he was still young and inexperienced. Since Sly 2 moves into a deeper direction, so does our hero himself, with a much more subtle and much more mature facial structure. This is most apparent in the Binoculacom scenes, and once you see each character's new model, it's a tiny bit jarring to go back. So much of the rest of the game takes that leap forward visually as well. Enemies look more menacing, and there are more of them. Each Claw Gang member has at least 3 different types of henchmen, each of which has its own feel, both in and out of combat. Hell, I mean, Rajan has actual elephants roaming around, which raises the question, why are there regular animals in a world dominated by anthropomorphic animals? That gets even darker when you see this mounted moose head in Jean Bisson's cabin. Is that a regular moose, or is that a guard that said the wrong thing in front of the boss? This is giving me the creeps, I'm out of here.
Whoa, wait a sec, Mr. Rossetti! I saved my game, don't punish me!
Oh, he did not just do that, now it's on.
Fabrizio, what are you doing here?
I think they call this one jumping the shark.
What?
Hey, it's your boy Fabrizio, here we go.
Wait, no, Fabrizio, no!
Bentley's palms are sweaty, shell's weak, crossbow is ready. He's getting into fights with Mr. Rossetti.
Mama spaghetti.
He's nervous, but on the surface he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. But he keeps fighting Rossetti.
I made this channel to review video games. What happened to me? Of course, the attempt at going for a grander scale does come with some setbacks. There's a decent amount of pop-in on certain pieces of terrain, for example. Generally, the game's also a bit buggier than Sly 1, as you saw with... yeah, that. They're usually very small bugs that don't affect the game in the slightest, but they're noteworthy regardless. My favorite is when enemies are instantly killed by a high fall, despite the fall only being like 10 feet. It's all in good fun as long as the game doesn't crash, but be warned, there is one specific mission where the game really likes to do just that. I've had 2 separate crashes in this bear cave on the PS3, several years apart, and I very vaguely remember the exact same crash happening to me once on PS2. Thankfully, Sly 2 is very good about its autosave, but having to reset your system entirely is a bit of a minus, I would say. The last thing I'll touch on here is the soundtrack, which is again a massive step up from Sly 1. Each overworld and most of the interiors have their own themes, and rather than settling as background music, these become another character in themselves. Sly 2 introduces the Sly Cooper theme, a piece so iconic that I actually played it in the Sly 1 review, and most of you probably didn't notice because it goes that hand in hand with the series. Essentially, every overworld theme in the entire franchise from here on out adds a reference to the Sly theme. This keeps firmly planted in your mind, no matter what you're doing, that you're playing a Sly game. It might sound like this would get annoying, but it never does, because each theme still does an excellent job of differentiating itself, while still making sure to bring it on home. Band of Thieves almost completes the trifecta. The story is superb, the gameplay is top-notch, and the presentation is right up there too. However, there are a lot of those little bugs and quirks that do add up, even if individually they're not harming the game. Those plus that big crash and Carmelita's amateur hour performance mean that I have to lop at least something off the score here. For its presentation, Band of Thieves will earn a silver bolt. When I say that Sly 2 is one of the best PS2 games of all time, I'm not exaggerating one bit. The game has a little bit of something for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are or how old you are. Unless you hate fun, you're probably gonna have a blast with this game. What makes it even more impressive is this is only Sucker Punch's 3rd game that they had ever made, and they absolutely hit it out of the park. The question is, where do we go from here? And the answer to that will be found in the next video of the Sly Cooper Marathon when I take a look at Sly 3, Honor Among Thieves. And for those of you wondering why there was a decently sized gap between the Sly 1 video and the rest of the marathon, well, there are a few reasons why, and I'll get to those in a little while. As always, thank you for watching, and stay golden.